Hey everyone, it's that time of year where people put out their favorite lists, top 10s, favorite books, whatever. So I wanted to throw together a quick video of some of my favorite books. I read, as of recording this, which it's December 16th, I've read 108 books this year. Maybe a few more, I'll finish a few more in the next few weeks. But out of those books, I wanted to highlight 3 that came out in 2020 that I loved, and then several that came out before this year that I just wanted to highlight, including a few that I reread. So I'm going to go through them quickly. I'm not going to do a deep dive on any individual one, but just talk a little bit about why I liked it so much, and maybe you'll find one that you want to check out. So in no particular order, I'm going to start with the 3 that came out in 2020. These aren't ranked in any way. They're just the 3 that came out this year, and then I'll talk about 4 books that came out before the year started. So the first one is Jesus and John Wayne by Kristen Kobes-Dumais. I've referenced this in a couple other reviews. I pointed to it. I haven't done a review of it myself. I might do that. I wrote a review for the Englewood Review of Books, which I contribute to, which I'll link to that review in the description. But I adored this book. It is a narrative history of kind of the last century-ish of, although it really kicks off maybe more in like the 50s, of evangelicalism. It's a bit of a provocative subtitle as these things go, but I thought the writing is excellent, the research is very well done, the threads that Dumais is pulling on, she's pointing at something that is a very real force in evangelical subculture in America, and it's that force of kind of loving the rugged masculine figure. And for me, as someone who grew up solidly in this culture and through a lot of the culture-shaping events she talks about, I just resonated so deeply with the narrative that she's spinning up. And it honestly helped me connect some dots from some things that I'd experienced in my own life growing up in this culture. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it after I put it down. And I've referenced it in so many conversations. I found myself pointing to it, pointing people to it over and over again. I just think that she is saying something really important and something that's very, very helpful for especially our cultural moment with what's happening politically and culturally and everything in the country. So really, really love this book, Jesus and John Wayne. The next one is, I think this technically came out in late 2019, but I discovered it on 2020 lists, so I'm considering it a 2020 title, but it's by Timothy Egan. That's A Pilgrimage to Eternity. This is a really wonderful combination of different styles of writing. Timothy Egan, who I've never read before, although he's a pretty well-established author, he went on his own, as the title suggests, a pilgrimage in which he walked or journeyed, traveled from Canterbury to Rome, mostly through Western Europe, a lot through France into Italy. So it's partly a travel book where he chronicles his own journey through the part of the world. He writes really beautifully about the scenery and the architecture, and so if you like travel books, you'll like that. But also, he's approaching it as a spiritual journey, as the subtitle suggests. He describes himself as a lapsed Catholic, and he wanted to do this pilgrimage to try to look at faith, the Christian faith and tradition anew. And so he writes about spirituality. So if you're interested in spirituality, this is a good book for that. He writes about church history, because as he learned about the monuments and the architecture and all that, each chapter goes into historical events. So if you like history, it's good for that. And then finally, it's also a bit of memoir, where he talks about his own life and the life of his family and the faith he was raised in, and how he was harmed by the church. And it's very honest, it's very raw, it's also very funny, and very, very, very winsome in so many ways, very emotional at parts. So if you like memoir, you'll be drawn to that. So it's just a wonderful combination of different styles. There's something in it for lots of different people. I was really taken with this book and surprised by it because it was totally not on my radar, but Pilgrimage to Eternity, really loved. And then this is kind of a flashpoint book right now, especially in more of the conservative reformed world of evangelical culture, which is not something I'm particularly immersed in myself, but that is Carl Trueman's pretty brand new book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. I really liked this book. I went into it with a little bit of trepidation, and I might actually I think I'm going to do a full review of it because it deserves some more conversation. I went into it with a little trepidation, to be honest, because I saw it being used by maybe some like culture war types as a book they were so excited about, and whenever I sense that, I get a little skeptical. But I'm really glad I didn't let that keep me away from the book, because it is a very, very good book. It's an excellent engagement with some deep thinking, people like Rousseau, people like Nietzsche, people like Marx. And he is coming from a very conservative Christian perspective, but he is not creating a straw man, and he's not waging a culture war, and it's not an angry polemic. It's a very thoughtful engagement with philosophical and cultural currents that are alive and well in our time. And I think it's just a book that really demands to be taken seriously. And I found it really helpful. And as someone who loves philosophy, I found it to be not shallow. I found it to be very provoking, and just a wonderful book, and something that is worth attention, even if you aren't in the conservative, especially Reformed, Gospel Coalition kind of cultural stream. It should be read widely outside of that stream, I think. So that's Carl Trueman's book. So those are the 3 that came out in 2020 that I loved. Now I want to highlight a few that came out before 2020. That I also loved, and one is Tom Holland's. This is another work of history, Dominion, The Making of the Western Mind. This is the UK version. I liked this cover and title better, so I'm kind of a nerd that way and tracked this one down. But the US version, it's the same exact book, but it has a different subtitle. It's called How the Christian Revolution Remade the World, something like that. This is my first book that I've read from Tom Holland. He's a well-established historian, writes on a pretty popular level. It's not dense, but it's very academically rooted. And this is a sweeping history of Western civilization, as the title suggests. And he is not a Christian. He's coming actually spiritually skeptical, but he is convinced as an historian that the West owes a deep, deep debt in our ethics and in our conceptions of humanity in the world to the Christian tradition. And so he's tracing that impact of Christianity through broad, sweeping historical epochs. So if you like civilization, world kind of zoomed out, big scope history, this is an excellent book. He's just a great writer, super gripping, not hard to get through. I found it really compulsively readable. So I really recommend Dominion by Tom Holland. Now a couple novels. One I did a full review on, so I won't say too much more about it, but The Overstory has got a lot of attention. Just a beautiful, beautiful book. Really impacted the way I think about my place in the world, caused me to meditate on trees and the world that I walk in, that I live in. And it's just an intricate knitting together of different stories and different character portraits. And I love, like David Mitchell, someone who does that really well. I think Richard Powers knits together these stories in a way that's so compelling. I just adored this book. Would highly recommend it if that sounds of all of interest to you. Now 2 more that hardly need me to praise them, but that I reread this year. When the pandemic started, I thought, all right, I'm going to reread Lord of the Rings. This is my single volume edition of it. I went into the reread a little nervous, because I thought, maybe, is it going to hold up? Have I read too much other fantasy? Is that going to kind of tarnish my experience of this book? And I'm happy to say that, wow, this holds up. It is a stunning work of fantasy still to this day, and I'm not just saying that through nostalgia glasses. I reread it really wanting to be honest in my reaction, and man, this is just an outstanding story. Beautifully written. Even the poetry and the songs, which when I was a kid I kind of skipped over those when I read this, I found myself sinking into it. It's actually tight storytelling at 1,000 pages. He does more in this book than a lot of epic fantasy writers can do in 3,000 pages today. I'm looking at you, Robert Jordan. I'm reading Wheel of Time right now. But man, this is it's a classic for a reason. It's probably my favorite book and holds up as my favorite book still. And then one more, which is actually kind of a tight race with that title, is Stephen King's The Stand. Yes, I read this in a real-life pandemic, also wondering if it would hold up, and man, is it great. It is great. Just pulse-pounding, one of his best books, possibly my favorite book by him. This is my unabridged version, so it's a meaty about 1,200 pages. But story of good and evil, story of people finding groups, and the last person alive. It's one of those just epic showdowns, and I love it. I just love this book. One of the best things he has written, and he's written a lot of good stuff. So those are my favorites of 2020. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you for my next review.